we laugh? With the jazzy music?
Go ahead, Madison.
Okay, well, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Madison Kelly. I am the founder of Out Rochester, which is an online forum or an online community dedicated to connecting and celebrating the LGBTQ people of Rochester. This is our first forum ever, so we're super grateful that you guys chose to attend and support our community. Hopefully we'll be able to have more events like this soon. So I'd like to introduce my co-moderator, Vangie Castro.
So good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hello, I'm Vangie Castro, community organizer and LGBTQA+ activist. I'll be co-moderating today's forum with Madison Kelly of Out Rochester. We are excited to be hosting the first forum that specifically focuses on issues that concern the LGBTQA+ community and voters. I'm honored to be here and asked to co-moderate. More voters are identifying as part of the LGBTQA+ community and are voting in record numbers. Additionally, many voters are LGBTQA+ allies, and because of their support, were able to defeat the Minnesota Marriage Amendment in 2012 by 51.5%, allowing a pathway for Minnesota marriage equality in 2013. As nonpartisan candidates, constituents are curious to know if you'll be able to represent all of the diverse voices in the city of Rochester. So today's forum format will go something like this. We'll have some opening comments from the candidates. They'll get 90 seconds. We'll move into answering questions. Each candidate has 1 minute to answer the question, and then the other candidate has 30 seconds to readdress if they wish. There will be 3 questions asked, and they have received these questions ahead of time. If we have time towards the end, we'll have candidates answer questions from anyone who's watching from the live audience. Closing comments, the candidates get 60 seconds, and that we have provided them a prompt that they can use, and then we'll close out the event. So we'll start off with flipping a coin. Does anybody have a coin?
You didn't bring one?
I do.
I have it, but it's okay. So is it you guys show us the front and back to make sure there's a heads and a tail.
It's a penny.
All right. So
Okay.
Kathleen, you get to call heads or tails.
Heads.
Tails, although you guys trust me, right? Okay.
So, well, because that means that you gets to start, Brooke.
Okay. Are we ready to go?
Yes. Thank you for. So we'll have you introduce yourself. This forum is for the City Council President candidacy.
All right. Thank you, Vangie and Madison. Nice to see you, Kathleen. I'm Brooke Carlson. I'm so pleased to be running for City Council President. I was born and raised in Rochester and part of a family that is deeply committed to improving our community and our world. It's both my job and my passion to work every day to bring public and private partners together to find solutions to some of our community's most significant challenges. I'm a small business owner, a leader in the nonprofit community, a public health professional, a community volunteer, and a mother of 2 young sons. My expertise in urban planning, human services, and public health enables me to guide communities to create strong and inclusive places where people and businesses can thrive. The COVID-19 crisis has reshaped the landscape of our community along with our movement towards increasing and improving racial justice. A favorite saying of mine is, with breakdown comes breakthrough. In this crisis, we have a chance to innovate around issues that matter to us, promote equity, and support people who live and work here. In this time of uncertainty, it is my sincere commitment to bring our many voices together to intentionally build a more just community, one motivated by compassion, courage, and hope. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen?
Well, thank you very much, Madison, and to the members, the online members of Out Rochester. I very much look forward to getting to know you all better. And discussing the issues of great concern to you. I have to say, many advised me not to come tonight, but I disagreed with them, and I disagreed with them strongly. I think it's important to have dialogue, always to have dialogue, and I'm here tonight with that intention to extend my hand in friendship and a real offer of continuing dialogue and understanding what your needs are and what I can help do and serve and how I can serve. So I want to use this time just to share a little bit about me today, not what I've done, but what makes me tick. I was a single mom. I raised my daughter in Washington, D.C., and I'm now a grandmother. I'm the daughter of working class parents, first in my family to go to college. I'm now and have always been blessed with relentless energy and optimism and a passion to make a difference. When I see a problem, I jump in, I form a team, and I get to work. As a young woman in Washington, and a fierce advocate for women's rights, I worked tirelessly to get more women elected to Congress, and I worked on legislation to promote economic equity for women, working across the aisle with Democrats and Republicans to solve real people's problems. A few years ago, I saw a problem in Rochester, and that was when the chamber, a number of women contacted me. The chamber was in serious situation. So I left my job at Mayo Clinic and went to work at the chamber, because I believe then, as I do now, in a community such as ours, with one very large employer, the voice of the other employers, small business, nonprofits, must be loud and must be strong and respected in city government. So I'm running today because I see another problem, and it is the impact, the recession, the continuing unemployment, the shutting down daily of small businesses in our community, which are the source of 1 in 3 jobs in Olmsted County. 33% of the workforce in Olmsted County comes from small business. And of course, dealing with the impact of systemic racism in our community, and the reality that I know all too well, when having been here just for 10 years, that Rochester is a wonderful community. It can be very warm, but not always as welcoming as we might want to be. So I'm running on a simple platform, simple yet complicated, to promote a recovery for all, not just a few, to make Rochester the most inclusive city we can be, and to champion a sustainable and high quality of life for all residents. I want to be a community where everyone has the freedom to live their truth without fear and with and under equality in the law. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. So before we get started with our other questions today, I just wanted to say, everyone who's watching on Facebook or YouTube, we will be taking audience questions later in the forum. So you can just comment those and we will be sharing some of those at the end. All right, so our first question today, Brooke, well, Brooke and then Kathleen, but Brooke, we'll start with you. Do you agree or disagree with the recent decision to ban conversion therapy in Rochester? Why or why not?
Sure. I unequivocally.
Oh, Catherine, you might have to
Mute.
What is happening?
mute your mic.
Okay.
Okay.
All good. Okay.
For
Well,
some reason, yeah, there we go. Okay. We're good. We're
Sorry
good.
about that, everyone.
Maybe it was that noise, because we shouldn't have had to ban conversion therapy to begin with, because it shouldn't have existed. But yes, I unequivocally support the ban on conversion therapy and believe this should have happened a long time ago. So of course, conversion therapy, it has not only been discredited by a broad spectrum of healthcare and mental health provider and professional organization, but it's harmful to the LGBTQ plus individuals and their families. I have a distinct memory of a dear family friend going through therapy with his minister as a teenager because he was trying to express to his family that he was gay. This suppression of his true self lasted for 2 decades and strained family relationships. It was only at age 35 that he was able to step forward into the life that he wanted and needed to have. A quote from the Southern Poverty Law Center says that people who have undergone conversion therapy have reported increased anxiety, depression, and in some cases, suicidal ideation. It can also strain family relationships because practitioners frequently blame a parent for a child's sexual orientation. This aligns with what my friend and colleague Jennifer Winter, who leads Rochester Pride, reminded me, that homelessness in particular ties into how queer youth are still often rejected by families and find themselves on the streets. So even in thinking about city issues related to homelessness, being sure that our homeless shelters are inclusive of all people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kathleen?
I would have voted.
I think so. Okay, is it okay? Is it working now?
Not, my picture keeps fading away.
Okay, well, we can hear you.
Okay, all right. Well, I definitely would have voted with the majority to ban conversion therapy. I think it is important for legislative bodies to sometimes go beyond legislating and make important statements about values. I think that's leadership. I definitely would have joined in that. And I believe that conversion therapy is wrong on so many levels. It's not based on any proven behavioral health model, quite the contrary. It's counter to the direction we want to go in our society, in which people are comfortable being themselves, speaking their truth, and I definitely would have supported it, and I applaud the City Council for bringing it forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you so
about
much.
that.
Sorry about that. Your mic issue there.
Yeah. All right. So we will go on to the second question. And we'll start with Kathleen. I'll read it first. Successful allyship with the LGBTQA+ community in Rochester goes beyond a statement of support. It requires continuous openness to listening and learning. With that in mind, please talk about something new you learned about the LGBTQA+ community recently.
Well, thanks, Vangie, for that question. And I think, I hope you can trust, you do trust, that you can count on me to not just listen, but to reach out, to request establishing a formal relationship that hopefully will turn into friendship, trusting friendship, where you can count on me to listen, to learn, and to advocate. I'm an experienced advocate, and I believe that is what elected office is mostly about, is being an advocate for the voice of the people. So I would welcome the opportunity to have consistent conversations with the members of Out Rochester and the LGBTQ+ community. Something new, not extraordinarily new, but I've focused on quite a bit recently, is the health disparities within the straight and the LGBTQ community, particularly the increased prevalence of cancer, especially ovarian, cervical, and
Kathleen,
breast cancer.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're having a mic problem. You might want to leave and then come back. That usually helps to.
I've done that twice already, but I'll try it one more time.
Okay. Well, I'll kick you out. I'll kick you out, and then you'll have to come back in. Sorry about that, everyone, but we want to make sure that everyone can hear Kathleen speak.
Yeah.
We just want to remind everyone, if you get a chance to ask a question, we will be happy to look through them and have the candidates answer them after the questions that we have sent them ahead of time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Oh, there it goes. Welcome back.
I'm afraid to say anything.
Okay, it sounds better this time.
Okay. Did Brooke go, or are you just waiting for me?
No, we were just waiting for you.
Okay. I will start over and try to be swift. First of all, I hope you come to trust that I am very interested in a strong, proactive relationship with the LGBTQ plus community. What that means to me is having regular conversations, not incidental, not just issue-based, but regular conversations so that friendship can be built, trust can be built, and that in time you will be confident that I will not just listen, I will learn, and I will be a strong advocate. That is my experience in being an advocate. I know how to do it. I know how to be a partner in doing it. In terms of some interesting new learnings, I've been studying quite a bit on the comparison of cancer prevalence in LGBTQ community and versus straight community. And I'm particularly concerned and increasingly concerned with the significant difference in the prevalence of cancer, particularly ovarian, cervical, and breast cancer in lesbian versus straight women. This is, as I study, I understand due to a number of conditions that most of which can really be changed and should be changed. First is the prevalence of the lack of insurance is a significant concern. But second is the lack of comfort in dialoguing with primary care physicians. And so in exploring that further, I was pleased, and I can remember this starting when I was at Mayo. There was more training for the providers at Mayo on developing more comfort in dealing with their patients. And for example, really reaching out and asking patients for their pronouns and helping the provider become more comfortable to allow the patient to become more comfortable, therefore getting into more and more early detection. The detection of the cancers were significantly later stage, which makes survivability a real problem. So that's something I'm deeply personally very concerned about, and a new learning. The other one is just much more personal, and it's my daughter, who's been a great teacher to me in my adult life and in her adult life, and she's taught me a lot about gender identity and how she's raising her daughter. She's so intentional about raising this baby without the traditional focus, the binary focus on gender identity. And I'm so proud. I'm learning so much more every single day. And it's fascinating to see how a child who is raised without this sort of binary preconditioning makes choices. She's 2 now. I see the difference in how my daughter is raising her and the difference in this child's behavior. So I'm learning very much on a personal level and very much on an academic personal interest level as well. So thank you for the question. It was really thoughtful.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Okay, Brooke, would you like to go?
Yes, so absolutely. Throughout my career in health and human services, we focused a lot on disparate health outcomes, like Kathleen was mentioning, and disproportionate rates of behaviors with negative impacts, such as tobacco use, as one example, in the LGBTQA plus residents in Minnesota and across the US. So while we've come a long way in understanding some of the disparities, we still have a gap in accurate data, in authentic engagement with individuals with lived experience, in developing strategies that enable the community to thrive. So I've been grateful for discussions I've had recently with Rochester Pride leadership and many residents of our community. We've talked about, related to Rochester Pride, how they as an organization can adapt through COVID and what their role is in being a voice for the community that can be more prominent right now as we're making decisions. So of course, best practices for using a lens of equity demonstrate how important it is from a city perspective that our staff and our leadership and our boards and commissions and our contracts not only reflect the great cultural and racial diversity in this community, but also gender and sexual diversity. So while I work closely with organizations that reflect our racial and cultural diversity on many projects, one new thing that I've learned is how there's a lack of representation of the LGBTQA plus community in Rochester's diversity, and how Rochester has historically not engaged this community in decision making at multiple levels. So, we have a long way to go, and this has to change. And I'm just so pleased to be having these authentic conversations and finding ways to walk beside the community in having a stronger voice to make decisions and influence our city's policies and practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooke. All right, our next question, we'll start with you, Brooke, again, and then go to Kathleen, is what is something you've done or helped do or plan to do to support the LGBTQA community in Rochester?
Sure. So I touched on this a little bit in my last response. Earlier in my career, I was part of an evaluation of a program for an LGBTQA plus serving organization in Minneapolis to better support individuals with tobacco cessation, because tobacco has been such a significant issue. What I'm working on and excited about right now is just that idea of engaging organizations like Rochester Pride and Madison, you and I were just touching on Out Rochester's future, to be part of the nonprofit consortium, which I lead, because we're going through a replanning phase right now, and we're committed to equity and justice. And we want to ensure that our LGBTQ plus serving organizations and residents have access to peers who are in leadership positions within organizations and supported going through everything we're going through right now as a community with COVID and building equity. And how do we make sure that as we're planning the next phase of the consortium, which is meant to support nonprofits across the community, that we engage and wrap the LGBTQ perspective into all decisions and perspectives going forward. So like I said, from a city perspective, we need to be using an equity lens on decisions and engagement with our community as a top priority moving forward, and certainly as a top priority of mine. But that needs to be happening in organizations, agencies, businesses across our community. So that's what I've done so far and look forward to doing.
Thank you so much. Kathleen?
I just want to mention how much I really appreciate how you've shaped the questions. They're really thoughtful and thought-provoking, so I really appreciate that. So in thinking about something I've done, and it's something I've been a friend to someone. I've given moral support to someone, to a dear friend in Washington, D.C., who's an EEOC, an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission member. And she fought for 2 years. She fought against the Justice Department to try to get the case to the Supreme Court that would make clear that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 applied to transgender and individuals. So and she won. She got it to the Supreme Court. She beat the Justice Department back. She survived. I was just a friend. I was just a friend to her, providing moral support for those long 2 years. But now the law of the land is that transgender employees can be protected from workplace discrimination. So if I've done anything, it's be a good friend to someone who had a very noble mission and a successful one. In terms of what I plan to do, I have a number of plans. One would be to really create an advisory committee capacity, so there'd be this consistent input that I mentioned before. But another area I've looked into, and I think has real potential for a proposal and a plan to be accepted in the community, is I was looking at crime and the incidence of bias crime, which is the sanitized word for hate crime, and what is it like in our community. And I think a crime of bias is something we really need to explore, and I fear that some of it may be somewhat hidden and in different ways and not necessarily recorded as such. But more importantly, I think what's needed is training for the Rochester Police Department. They do training now that does provide for exploration of internal biases. But I believe that a module should be added for working with and understanding the LGBTQ plus community. And I've had conversations with Chief Franklin about this, and I think he's receptive to this notion of adding more training specifically in working with the LGBTQ plus community. So I believe whether or not I'm elected, I would continue to advocate for this. And if this was something that you'd be interested in, I would love for you to join me in advocating this. I think we have a receptive department and a belief that this could be really valuable training for our law enforcement officers. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both, Brooke and Kathleen, for answering those questions. So we do have one question from the studio audience, from the live audience. But we wanted this to be more of a kind of a conversation since it's just the two candidates that we have today. The question itself is specifically for Kathleen, but I will pose it to both Brooke and Kathleen because and I'll kind of change it up a little bit. The idea that a lot of the candidates continue to say that they are listening to the dialogue of the community. And I think a lot of the community members feel like they are not being heard. So as you move beyond listening, what are some of the actions that you will do to address the issues that concern the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, active listening is different than passive listening. So I'd be an active listener. And I think to give you a list right now of what I would do without having done the listening would be somewhat disingenuous. I've told you some ideas I think needed to be done, like increasing the police training and sensitivity and in review of personal internal biases. But I'd want to hear more from the community. That's why I'd want to have a regular scheduled sessions of input and advisory committee so I can learn and listen and learn and then act. I don't want to presume I know. I don't know all the issues of concern to you. I can read. I read the Human Rights Commission. I understand employment discrimination, healthcare disparities, lack of insurance coverage, hate crimes. But I want to learn more directly from you and then develop a shared agenda of what we would do together with my strong advocacy on your behalf. So with all due respect, I think it's listen, learn, and then advocate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay, Brooke, do you want me to re-ask the question? Or so a lot of the community members feel that candidates speak a lot about listening and having dialogue with community members. And they feel that they want to understand how you are planning to move beyond listening and into action to address issues that concern the LGBTQA plus community.
Well, as I mentioned, there are many things that as we think about best practices in creating a just and equitable city that apply for people in the LGBTQ plus community, of course. So looking at hiring practices and boards and commissions representation and how we're prioritizing contracting, those things are all critically important. I think one thing Kathleen and I disagree with a little bit on is I'm really supportive of building on the infrastructure that we already have in place in this community to make sure that we're listening to people in a space that is safe and trusted and authentic, and we're not creating extra asks of people and contributing their energy to inform the city's policies. So I'm really thrilled to connect with Out Rochester and also with Rochester Pride and others in leadership in this community to be sure that we're finding those opportunities and those spaces to authentically engage and work together to shape the future of the city. So I worry a lot about people contributing time and energy that's not compensated, and know that it's deeply personal. And these issues, especially as we talk about healthcare, are deeply personal. And we need to be sure that we're doing it in a way that we're learning, but we're not only extracting and taking from, but instead working together to contribute to our community overall. So I think there's some really concrete things, but as far as continued engagement, I really would lean on the existing networks to help inform the best way to do that, so that we continue to use that lens and strengthen that lens of equity in all we're doing as a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke.
Madison, do you want to ask the next question
from the audience? Yes, I can.
From the comment section, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Randy says, to organizers, thank you for bringing the LGBTQ perspective to the fore. My question is, how can we make sure Rochester is a truly welcoming community for us? I work in Rochester, but often in Minneapolis. I feel so much more comfortable being myself up there. I really like this question because I think I can relate to it very personally. Myself and a lot of people my age don't often see ourselves staying in Rochester for personal reasons of not feeling like we belong here, or that there are places for us to go or a community to connect with, which is one of the reasons that I started Out Rochester, to kind of start bringing people together because I didn't know where to find people. So the question, again, Randy's question is, how can we make sure Rochester is a truly welcoming community for LGBTQ people? Kathleen, if you want to go ahead.
I think that's a really hard question, but it's a critical question. I've had this said to me from so many friends in the community that, you know, like Randy said, you go to if you go to a restaurant, or I'm thinking he's saying, if you go to a restaurant, two people, this is such a married community, and I don't even think people accept a single-sex marriage as part of it. So we have a long way to go, I think, in becoming that warm and welcoming community for everyone. I think, you know, our African American community feels that way, our Somali community feels that way. We do have a long way to go. And I think government has a role to play, but I think people have the role to play. The leaders have a role to play in saying, in promoting more places. Like Madison, what you're doing with Out Rochester is so important. And I have to say, I read a website for Out Rochester in Rochester, New York, and what they've done. I mean, if we could work to help support the creation and expansion of your organization to be more like that and educate the community in non-threatening, open ways, would be invaluable. So I would want to work, if elected, and I think even now as a private citizen, working for ways to create not just safe spaces, but congregating spaces for everyone to learn about each other, and to, in time, become that inclusive city. It's one of the goals I have. It's probably one of the top goals, the top three for certain. We are not as inclusive as we should be. I think our unspoken biases are significant. I mean, we're still very much a small community. While we like to think of ourselves as a city, we still behave in some ways like a small community. So specifics, hard to say, but I think what you're doing with Out Rochester is really critical. You need more. I would urge that more people, such as myself, support the effort and help expand it, and educate through shared experiences, getting to know people with different life experiences. It sounds so simple, but it's so profound and it's so needed on so many levels in this community. We are a divided community in many, many ways. And I see having more dialogue, more opportunity to be with each other and truly listen to each other is just critical. It's often been said that people in Rochester will give you directions anywhere except to their house for dinner. And I've thought a lot about how do we become more welcoming and more inclusive. And I think government policies are a part of it, but opening up our hearts to each other and having opportunities to really share, meaningfully share, unthreateningly share is absolutely critical to changing and to make certain that everyone feels comfortable here.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Brooke?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a conversation I've had so many times with so many different groups of people here in Rochester. Recently speaking to a group of African-American residents who were talking about how they can develop an organization to support Black residents in either moving here to Rochester and feeling welcomed and included, or those who have lived here for years and years and don't feel welcome and included. This is such an interesting space that we live in this nationally renowned city that many people don't feel welcome in. And I know that I grew up here and this is my home, and it's been wonderful to come back here and raise my children here. But my family is Jewish, and I was one of the only Jewish students in my class growing up and was always othered. And so I understand a sliver of what it feels like and how important it is to create space, dialogue, engagement, not only with one particular organization, but really thinking about how do we build the fabric of our community together across sectors to be supportive of all the residents who call Rochester home. So it truly is a home for those who live here. And as a city council and as our, or as I said before, our organizations across the community, our businesses, if we are creating leadership that is reflective of the different cultures and groups that live in our community, that is a really important step in the right direction of demonstrating that we value people in leadership of all different perspectives and backgrounds. And I would love to just say, Madison and Vangie, what are your perspectives on that question? Where do we go from here? It's one thing for Kathleen and me to sit here and think about ideas, but really it has to be, the path has to be walked together.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Madison, you go first.
I mean, it's a big question. It's something that I've thought a lot about too. And like I said before, one of the reasons that I started Out Rochester as a place to kind of start finding that community. And I think that's one of the things that seems missing from Rochester sometimes is that sense of community. I know, kind of like you mentioned, I appreciate that you mentioned Brooke being one of the only Jewish people in your school. I think it felt similar for me being one of the only queer people I knew. I only had one other friend or two that I was open with in high school about that kind of thing. And so bringing, I think, Out Rochester and other organizations, bringing queerness and LGBTQ people into everyday life in Rochester and seeing those people just doing our thing and having events and stuff like that helps make Rochester feel more inclusive. I think a lot of us look at Minneapolis and see there are many queer organizations and gay bars and they're huge Pride Fest, and look as a place to escape to or move to rather than stay in Rochester. So being able to continue having events like this and more community activities and more open dialogue, I think, will contribute to Rochester feeling more welcome for LGBTQ people. Vangie, do you have any thoughts?
Well, on my end, I'm more of a policy person. If we want to talk about trying to create a more open and welcoming community, is about some of the archaic city policies that may make it difficult to have venues that are friendly to the LGBTQA plus community, such as like having drag shows or cabaret licenses and things like that. So we can, so folks can find places and venues where they can congregate with other people who are like them, or where they feel safe and welcomed. And I think that's what's really important. We have that one event, Rochester Pride, and that seems to be the only large event that we usually have. We do sometimes have some drag shows, but that should not just be the only thing that represents the LGBTQA plus community. We're a very diverse group of folks, race, ethnicity, gender, and gender identity. And so we should have some recognition about that, and some events and things that help to celebrate us throughout the year, not just at a festival or something like that. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Vangie.
All
We have
right.
a
Do we
couple
want to?
more audience
Yeah,
questions. We want to answer one of those quick.
Yeah. So Brooke and Kathleen, are you open to taking on one more audience question before closing? Okay. Okay. So which one do you want to take, Madison?
I think one of them is the question and one is just a statement.
Okay. Okay. So we have one question that says, from Jess, it says, we should not keep putting it on those who aren't being included to be the inclusivity educators, especially when we don't feel safe doing so. How will the candidates do the work of educating themselves and others to better support us? So we'll go with Kathleen.
I think that is absolutely critical. We cannot ask, always ask, tell me what it's like. We have to really, I think, and this is going to sound simplistic, but you learn what it's like when you truly befriend someone. You learn what it is like to walk in their shoes when you're walking alongside them. And I think that speaks to being much more inclusive. And as Madison is working so hard to do, have people have a place where others can walk with you. From a policy perspective, I think things have to be really clear. And as Brooke said earlier, everything that has to, decisions have to be made through a lens of diversity and equity, and to ensure that policies are being put through that prism when they're being made. But I know from myself, I have to constantly look into my own heart and ask myself the questions. What are my biases? Are they really there? It's so easy to say, oh no, I don't have them. But it's really tough to sit quietly and look deeply and ask some really tough questions of yourself. And as a leader, I try to do that just with my own staff and how we serve. We're a service organization. So we're always saying, how do we view our members? How do we view our service? What do we think of ourselves and our relationships with them? So I think it's absolutely critical for everyone to constantly be self-examining, and not for any part of the community to think they have a corner on knowledge. And we never know what it's like to walk in the other person's shoes, and presume that we know. But I think it is time to stop saying, teach us, tell us what it's like to be you. There's a lot to read, there's a lot to study, and there's the hand of friendship that has to be extended to really understand someone else's life experiences. And I think it's come from walking alongside and sitting alongside them in the city council meeting we have to do a lot more in this community to bring about much more comfort with leaders who don't look like ourselves. We have work to do, and that requires mentoring, raising up people who want to serve, tapping people on the shoulder saying, have you thought of serving? So we need people alongside of us in every part of our lives, from our leadership circles to our friendship circles. So thanks for that question.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah.
And just to repeat am I cutting out?
Yeah.
A little.
You froze for a little bit,
I
but
froze
that's
for a little
okay.
bit. Okay, I'm back.
It happens.
So the question again was, how will you do the work of educating yourself on LGBTQ issues and others to better support the LGBTQ community?
Mhm. There are a couple issues here. There is the education and learning about important issues and understanding different aspects and diversity within the LGBTQIA plus community. But there's also the co-creating of policy within a city that does require deep and authentic engagement with the community who's living the experience. So I see there's absolutely the need for the self-education. And in fact, I would say as a community, if we can work together to create resources that support education very broadly across our organizations and agencies and businesses, to make sure that it's not a lack of education, but instead, how do we focus on working together to shape the policies in our community? And you may have heard me say this before, but I'm very concerned in general with lack of compensating people for their time and energy in informing in informing policy decisions. So we talk about with the DMC work going on right now, how they are compensating the people who are part of the transit planning process. I think that's a really important step forward. In projects I'm part of with IMAA and the Diversity Council, we're compensating people for their time if we're doing interviews or focus groups with them. So we're sure that we're acknowledging that there is value and contribution and energy that goes into that, along with expenses related to transportation and childcare and all of that. So I think there are many layers of practices that we need to be thinking about to make sure that if we are asking people for their time, which I think we need to in order to set policy that best reflects the unique context that we live in here in Rochester and as our community, in order to make really good decisions that better support our community overall. So self-education, yes. Working on systemic education across sectors, yes. And figuring out where the best value and where those safe and authentic spaces exist already to tap into instead of taking from a community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooke.
Yeah. Thank you, Brooke and Kathleen, for answering those questions. So we're getting to the end, and we had sent a prompt earlier to the candidates for their closing statement. Yesterday would have been 2 weeks till the November election, and that allows voters a chance to change their vote if they so choose to. It's now 13 days, so you can't do that. But if you had the opportunity to try to convince voters that had voted for your opponent to vote for you, what would you say? And this will be your closing statement. Let's go with Brooke.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm a systems thinker, so I'm really energized about thinking about how I can personally and we as a community can be better advocates for LGBTQ plus residents here and make sure that voices are represented in all levels of government. So that's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to further discussions. But this is also a really personal issue and requires personal investment, as we were just talking about, for those of us who are influencing future generations. So Kathleen mentioned her grandchild. As a parent of 2 young boys, my husband and I are doing everything we can to support them in becoming compassionate, informed, and accepting humans. We're fortunate in my family to have a cousin who's a colonel in the Air Force and soon to be Space Force, which is amazing, who transitioned from Brian to Bree when my sons were very little. So Bree's an advocate on a national stage for transgender persons' rights in the military. And my kids and I have walked this journey with my cousin and grown in our allyship and advocacy each step of the way. We always have room to grow, of course, but it's an honor to be raising a new, hopeful generation, while also being an advocate for creating a new space so that all residents in our community can be part of shaping the future of our city. So that's a little bit about why I hope that you'll consider my commitment to this community and how I can be an advocate for you. From a broader community lens, I just wanted to also say that I'm at the heart of our community's collective effort to support people and create efficient, just, and thoughtful systems that work together to meet our shared goals as a community. And my strength is in learning from a broad range of voices to find that shared value and move our work forward together. I want this community to be the very best it can be so that people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds can thrive for generations to come. We know that budget shortfalls demand that we be bold and creative and make tough decisions when we need to. This will require new ways of working with our community and public-private partnerships to address issues that really matter to us, like transportation and housing and economic development. I'm committed to learning from what has worked really well and where we build new systems and new ways of doing things to inform where we've had deficits in the past. I have my positions posted on a number of issues on my website and would encourage you to check out brook2020.com, and please feel free anytime to reach out to me. I really value the opportunity to learn from people and different perspectives and what matters to people in the community. So thank you so much for your time and listening in tonight.
Thank you so much, Brooke.
Right.
Would you repeat
Kathleen.
the question?
So voters would have had an opportunity to change their vote if they usually get 2 weeks before the general election. If you had the opportunity to talk to a voter that voted for your opponent, how would you convince them to vote for you if they are part of the LGBTQA+ community or just community in general?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks. The first thing I'd say to that person is, thank you so much for voting. Your voice really matters. And I am thrilled that you voted. It's tough. I've only been in the Midwest for a little more than 14 or so years, and Minnesota nice has rubbed off on me already. I try to fight it, and I promise you I'd fight it if I'm on the city council. But I've never, and I pledged in the very beginning that this would be a very positive, issues-oriented race. But if I had to talk to someone, I would say, I'd look them in the eye, and I'd say, if you made your decision because you put me in a box that says, I'm just about business, or you can't trust me because I worked at a certain place, or you think you have this impression of me because I look a certain way, I'd say, please look inside your own biases and give me a chance. Take a moment to look at my heart and why I'm doing this. A year and a half ago, I probably wouldn't have done it. I would have said, it's time for others to lead. But I jumped in because I believe my experience in legislating, in regulating, in politics, in learning how to work and knowing how to work with a legislative body and a regulatory body, building coalitions, listening, learning, and advocating, I think is what we need now. I think my experience can be beneficial to this community. I have tremendous respect for my opponent. I wish we were both running and two of us could be there. I think we have different strengths. But I think my strength right now is experience we need to help us through these tremendously challenging times. 1 in 3 jobs in this community are at huge stake right now. Our economic strength is at stake right now. And that means the ability of this community to thrive. I believe I have the strength, the passion, and the proven record of leadership to help do what is necessary to move Rochester forward. And so I would respectfully request you reconsider your vote, knowing how grateful I am that you did in fact vote. Thank you.
Great. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. So, we won't have time to take all the questions. We had some earlier questions that were sent to us, and we let the candidates know that we will forward those questions onto them. If they choose to answer those questions, we will then later on post those answers on the Out Rochester platforms, both on Facebook and Instagram. Well, Madison, do you want to go first, or?
Yes, well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And if you viewers haven't checked out Rochester yet, I would encourage you to. We're on Facebook. You can just search Out Rochester, and we're also on Instagram. That's our main platform, just at Out Rochester. I have it right on the screen for you. Thank you so much. This is really exciting to just sit down and talk about LGBTQ issues, and it seems from the comments so far that people are very appreciative that you two have decided to sit down with us and talk about these issues. So just from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Thank you for having us. And if I
So
could very quickly say that regardless of who you vote for, whichever one of us wins, it's very clear that we are advocating in a new way to support this community. So thank you for the time. This is a new space. We can create it together, regardless whether it's Kathleen or me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful and honored that you both chose to come to this forum. And thank you again for your participation in tonight's candidate forum. So the general election is on November 3rd. Early voting has already begun. We'll provide links to the candidates' websites if you'd like to learn more about them. Have a wonderful night. Stay safe and be well.
And I put the website